Okay, let's establish a few parameters before we dig into No Time to Die, the endgame of the Daniel Craig James Bond franchise. Admittedly, this review is probably going to be harsher than others, enough to make you assume I just don't like movies at all, and you were wrong for trusting the opinion of a guy who thinks so highly of himself and his opinions, he expects you to use YouTube as a valid source of information. Wake up, sheeple. The truth is, I'm just not really a James Bond fan, period. I know, what's not to like? A charming, wisecracking spy who drives fancy cars, drinks heavily, visits exotic locations, all while being generally terrible at his job but still beds every woman who looks in his general direction, all with a British accent and a license to kill. Seriously, this should be everything I've ever wanted out of a hero in a film, and yet 007 doesn't resonate with me in the slightest. So when we talk about No Time to Die, the 25th entry into the decade-long anthology film series, just know that I'm coming from a place where the character and story really just aren't my thing. I'm not versed in the James Bond lore, and I have zero personal connection to it all. So a final send-off to a 15-year-long run of interconnected movies heavily reliant on previous entries both within the Craig Bond and the checklist of what makes a Bond film is really not made for me. Okay, so now that we've given a why behind the what and you've gotten your heavy dose of trigger warnings, let's unpack this thing. No Time to Die is written and directed by Cary Joji Fukunaga and written by film newcomer Phoebe Waller-Bridge along with franchise regulars Neil Purvis and Robert Wade. Personally, anytime you have 4 writers for one movie, things are bound to go awry. And there are just simply too many hands in the cookie jar, and you absolutely feel that disjointedness here. Cary is a stellar visionary director with relatively extensive work, but most notably recognized for his work on True Detective, The Good Season. For all the faults you and I may be able to find within No Time to Die, one thing is certain: Cary is a stellar visual director. He absolutely nails the action set pieces, practical stunt work, and gorgeous sweeping landscape shots. No Time to Die sports some of the best visuals I've seen in a Bond film, and while my memory may be a little bit hazy when it comes to previous entries, I can say that the main strength of this film is how dazzling it all looks. Cary even opts to add one of his trademark one-take shots on a stairwell, something we've seen a lot recently, but probably best done in Daredevil Season 1 and True Detective Season 1, and it's beautiful to watch and ends with one of the best James Bond puns in the entire film. That's actually not that big of an achievement, considering that where No Time to Die struggles the most is with the imbalance of grounded grit versus classic James Bond camp, poorly written villains, and underutilized cast additions heavily reliant on previous entries, and its very, very, very long runtime. I get it, you want to give Craig every additional second you can, seeing as how it's his one last ride, but unlike Fast and the Furious, he means it. But stretching the narrative beyond its means isn't the way to do it. The film whizzes by in the first act, but comes to a screeching halt in the second, with a lot of moping around from place to place and person to person, all while never really giving us a reason to care. The third act does pick up, but by that point, the storytelling is so messy, it's hard to really grasp the stakes or motivations when they are already so muddled you practically need cliff notes to know what the hell is going on. That's not uncommon for Bond films, that much I know, but villains tend to shoulder the films and cement themselves as being just as iconic and silly as Bond himself. Here, I can't tell you the name of the villain. All I know is he's played by Rami Malek and wants to poison the world or something. What's frustrating is he has this creepy white mask that by all accounts should be used as his primary moniker and villain look, but he literally wears it for all of 2 minutes and then never ever dons it again. It's a waste of a cool Bond villain plot device, and even more so a waste of the villain altogether. I can't decide if I just don't like Rami Malek or I don't like the way his character is written in No Time to Die, but I've struggled to get it with him in just about every film he's been in recently. And yes, that includes Bohemian Rhapsody, a mess of a movie that gave Malek recognition for a decent Freddie Mercury impression that he didn't even actually sing for, and even then you could still tell it was Rami Malek being, well, Rami Malek. I digress. The point is, even if he was a good Bond villain, he's not here. He never really comes off all that threatening, and his master plan is buried underneath countless attempts to connect everything about him to previous entries. And that's another major fault of this film. If you haven't seen Casino Royale, Skyfall, and especially Spectre very recently, you will quite literally have no fucking idea what's going on. That's a tall order for any film to ask of its audience, considering that the previous entry was released over 6 years ago and isn't really that fondly remembered by even the most die-hard of fans. Nevertheless, No Time to Die feels like the Spectre 2 Electric Boogaloo rather than its own standalone film. I literally had to lean over and ask, "Who's Madeline?" And my friend gave me the Bond in 60 seconds just so I could follow along. That's a huge problem because No Time to Die isn't its own thing. It's a small part of a larger story and acts as the direct conclusion to a 15-year story rather than a Bond film that happens to connect to the others. The connection is front and center instead of being in the background, and it's really off-putting to the casual moviegoer who isn't going to invest 12 hours of film just to put all the pieces together in No Time to Die. This isn't the MCU, Mr. Bond.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Lastly, the movie is imbalanced, only partially leaning into the ridiculousness of the spy genre and never really embracing the inherent absurdity. I know that that's been a driving force of these Craig Bond movies, but the more they flirt with it, the more it makes you kind of miss it. Ana de Armas is the perfect example of this, showing up for about 30 seconds longer than was shown in the trailer, but stealing the show not just because she's my undying celebrity crush who can do no wrong, but because she's delightfully playful and brings that out in Bond in their brief interaction together. It's this almost out of place silliness that harkens back to the previous Bond eras, and it's honestly one of the best scenes in the film, and it doesn't take away from any of the grounded reality this franchise has founded itself on. It's a little later than normal, but let's do a quick speed round on the good to end on a relative high note. Ana de Armas and Lashana Lynch are terrific additions to the cast, and though underutilized, they kick all kinds of ass with right as rain in the Bond world, and I would honestly watch any spin-off their characters could front. I know your fragile masculinity crumbles when you hear the phrase Lady Bond, but Lynch is awesome as 007 and puts that baby to bed quickly, even if it's only for a few moments. Daniel Craig is great and looks like he wants to be here instead of looking like he'd rather be in his trailer during filming like he did in Spectre. And really, everyone is doing the best with what they're given. The visuals are great, the stunt work is impressive, the action is big and bold and practical, and there are some genuinely classic Bond moments that really act as the highlight of the film overall. And yes, while I'm not necessarily the one invested here, No Time to Die is a worthy send-off to Craig's long run as the classic character. The conclusion feels justified and purposeful, as well as a fitting end to an era. No Time to Die will probably satisfy fans of this franchise and Bond as well, but it's far from the best entry both within the 25 film canon and this 5-film franchise run. It's got some issues, a lot of them, but also has some shining moments too that make me wish there was more of that and less of what we got. It's not a bad film, but it's not particularly a good one either, and I probably won't ever watch it again. I guess all that's left to do is die. Just kidding, there's no time for that. Oh, and Anna, call me.
Can I just have one nice evening, please, before the world explodes?